The nights with Sarah used to feel endless, in the best way. We would sit on the edge of the bed long after midnight, backs against the wall, legs tangled together, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes it was about the future, where we wanted to live, how we imagined our lives 5 years from now. Other times it was just laughter over small memories, inside jokes that only made sense to us. The world outside our room felt distant, irrelevant. In those moments it felt like nothing could reach us. I wasn't the kind of man who loved loudly. I didn't post grand declarations or make dramatic promises. I loved quietly, consistently. I showed up, I listened. I remembered the small things, how she took her coffee, the way she went silent when something bothered her, the songs she pretended not to like but always hummed. For me, love wasn't about intensity, it was about presence. Sarah used to say that was what she loved most about me, that I made her feel safe. That with me, she could finally breathe. Our days followed a rhythm that felt permanent. Morning texts before work, quick calls during lunch breaks, late dinners where we shared one plate because neither of us cared enough to cook properly. On weekends we'd talk about trips we'd take someday, businesses we'd start, a home that would feel like ours. I didn't just imagine a future with I adjusted my life to fit it. My plans, my work, my sacrifices quietly revolved around us. That's why I didn't notice the change at first, or maybe I noticed and chose not to name it. It started small. Her phone was always face down now, even when we were alone. Notifications buzzed, and she'd glance at the screen quickly before turning it away. When I asked who it was, she'd answer casually, almost too casually. Just work, a friend, nothing important. She still laughed with me, still held my hand, still kissed me goodnight. But something about her attention felt divided, like part of her was always somewhere else. Sometimes, in the middle of our late-night talks, she'd drift off, eyes flicking to the screen beside her. I'd pause mid-sentence, waiting for her to come back to me. She always did, smiling, apologizing, but the moment passed, never fully returned. I told myself I was overthinking, and everyone gets distracted. Life gets busy. I trusted her, not blindly, but deliberately. I believed that if something was wrong, she would tell me. That's how we were, wasn't it? Honest, open, real? I had built my sense of security around that belief, around her. There were moments when I almost asked more questions, when a strange feeling settled in my chest, heavy and unfamiliar. But then she'd rest her head on my shoulder, or squeeze my hand, or look at me the way she used to, and the doubt would fade. Love has a way of silencing instincts. When you want to hear what they were saying. I didn't love her halfway. I didn't keep backup plans or emotional exits. I loved her with the assumption that we were choosing each other every day, even when it was boring, even when it was hard, especially then. That's what made it dangerous. Because when you build your life around someone, you don't notice the foundation cracking right away. You notice it when it's already too late, when the silence feels heavier than the noise ever did. That night, as she slept beside me, her phone lighting up softly on the table, I felt that faint discomfort again. A quiet, unwelcome thought knocking at the back of my mind. I turned away from it, closed my eyes, and chose trust over fear. I trusted her not because she promised me anything, but because I never imagined she'd be capable of breaking it. The change didn't arrive all at once. It slipped in quietly, disguising itself as stress, as workload, as life being life. Calls that used to come without effort were suddenly missed. Messages that once carried warmth became short, efficient, almost professional. When I asked how her day was, her answers felt rehearsed, as if she were reading from a version of herself I didn't fully recognize anymore. I noticed the patterns before I admitted them to myself. I always did. Sarah started coming home later than usual, her explanations wrapped in casual urgency. Meetings ran long, deadlines stacked up. Her tone shifted, not cold but distant, like she was already somewhere else, even while standing in front of me. When I spoke, she listened, but only halfway. Her eyes no longer searched my face for understanding. They drifted. I told myself this was what emotional maturity looked like. Not interrogating, not accusing, giving space without turning it into suspicion. Love, I believed, was trusting even when it felt uncomfortable. But there were moments when the silence between us spoke louder than any argument ever could. She smiled less with me, laughed quicker at her phone. Sometimes I'd be talking, and she'd nod. Distracted, fingers moving across the screen, she tilted away from me. When I asked who she was texting, her response came too fast, too practiced, just work stuff. If I pressed even slightly, her body language shifted. A sigh, a subtle eye roll, as if my curiosity was an inconvenience. That's when the questions began to form in my mind, uninvited and persistent. Am I overthinking? I tried to talk to her carefully, gently. I chose my words like they were fragile glass. I told her I felt a distance between us, that something felt different. She laughed it off, brushing my concerns aside with affectionate dismissal. You're imagining things, she said. You've always been sensitive. Then she kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like reassurance than intimacy. I wanted to believe her, so I did. There was a name she mentioned more often than others, a coworker, always in passing, always casual. He said this, he helped with that. I didn't think much of it at first. People talk about their colleagues all the time. But the name lingered, repeating itself in conversations where it didn't need to. It stayed in my head longer than it should have. Her absences grew more frequent, dinners postponed, weekends rearranged. When I asked if we could spend more time together, she sighed and told me I was making things complicated, that I should be supportive instead of insecure. The word insecure hit harder than I expected. It made me question myself instead of the situation, so I adjusted. I became quieter, more understanding. I stopped asking questions that might lead to uncomfortable answers. I convinced myself that trust meant endurance, that love meant swallowing doubt for the sake of peace. At night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone, the glow reflecting faintly in her eyes. I wondered when we had stopped talking the way we used to. I wondered when I became the one waiting. But every time that thought threatened to grow teeth, I pushed it down. I reminded myself of everything we had built, of the years, of the promises we never had to say out loud. I told myself that suspicion could destroy something beautiful if you let it, so I chose trust. One last time? Because sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive loudly. It waits until you convince yourself everything is fine. I wasn't looking for proof that night. I wasn't searching her phone or tracking her location. I had already told myself the story I needed to survive that. We were just going through a phase, that love bends sometimes but doesn't break. The truth didn't arrive because I chased it. It arrived because it stopped hiding. She left her phone on the kitchen counter when she went to shower. That almost never happened. The screen lit up once. Then again, I didn't touch it at first. I just watched it vibrate softly against the marble, like it was calling out to be noticed. A name flashed across the screen, the same one I'd heard too many times before. I picked it up. The messages weren't dramatic, no explicit confessions, no cinematic declarations of love. That's what made them worse. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. Casual affection, familiarity, that didn't belong to me anymore. Plans made without me even existing in the background. One message froze everything inside my chest. I wish you were here instead. I sat down slowly, like my body understood something my mind was still trying to deny. The room felt smaller, quieter. I scrolled back, not out of hope, but out of disbelief. Each line stripped something away from me, my certainty, my calm, my sense of reality. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a parallel life she had been living while I slept beside her. When she came out of the bathroom, towel around her shoulders, she knew instantly. Her face changed before I said a word. Shock first, then calculation, then fear. "Why are you holding my phone?" she asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I simply asked, "How long?" She tried to laugh. Tried to make it sound small. "It's not what you think." That sentence landed like confirmation. I looked at her and waited. Silence has a way of forcing people to reveal themselves. She filled it quickly. Explanations tumbled out: work stress, confusion, feeling neglected, not knowing how to talk to me anymore. None of it sounded like regret. It sounded like preparation. Like she had rehearsed this version of events in case the truth ever caught up. "What about us?" I asked. My voice didn't feel like it belonged to me. She hesitated, just for a second, but that second told me everything. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "I was just feeling something I hadn't felt in a while." That was the moment it broke, because cheating wasn't the deepest wound. Being replaced was. He hadn't stumbled into betrayal. She had slowly moved her emotional home somewhere else, while I stayed loyal to an empty space. I saw it clearly then: the late nights, the distance, the way her attention had slipped through my fingers without me realizing when it happened. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I didn't ask her to choose. I stood up. She panicked when she realized I wasn't reacting the way she expected. "Wait," she said. "We can talk about this. Don't do this like this." But there was nothing left to say. Any word I spoke would only give her something to hold on to: anger, guilt, closure. I wasn't willing to offer that. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. She followed me, voice cracking now, fear finally replacing excuses. "You're really just going to leave?" I paused for a moment, hand on the handle, not to respond, but to accept the truth fully. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the night. She was prepared for tears. She wasn't prepared for my silence. I didn't leave to make a point. I left because staying would have turned me into someone I didn't recognize. That night, I walked until the city thinned out, until the noise faded into something distant and manageable. I didn't call anyone. I didn't explain myself. I let the silence do what words never could. By morning, I was gone. No goodbye note. No final message. I blocked nothing and explained nothing. I packed only what I needed, left the rest exactly where it was: our apartment, our routines, the version of me that believed in forever. I took a train out of the city before sunrise, watching familiar buildings blur into unfamiliar space. Each mile felt like a quiet release and a fresh wound at the same time. The pain didn't disappear. It stayed with me, heavy and sharp, but I carried it without letting it leak onto anyone else. I didn't post cryptic messages. I didn't seek sympathy. I didn't try to prove I was okay. I simply removed myself from the place where my dignity was at risk. Sarah didn't understand at first. She texted like nothing had changed. Casual questions, half a When I didn't reply, the tone shifted. Messages stacked up, one after another, growing longer, more emotional. She called, then called again. Voicemails followed, confused, defensive, then suddenly afraid. She went back to the apartment and realized what silence actually meant. I wasn't there. My things were gone. Not everything's just enough to make it clear. This wasn't a break. This was an exit. Panic crept in where control used to live. She reached out to friends, to mutual connections, searching for a version of me she could still influence. No one knew where I was. That unsettled her more than anger ever could. While her world spun, mine narrowed. I checked into a small place far from the city, somewhere quiet enough that my thoughts couldn't echo too loudly. I woke up early, I walked, I worked, I let the grief hit me in waves, alone, without an audience. Some nights were brutal, sleep didn't come easily, memories did, but even in the pain, there was clarity. I understood something then that I hadn't before. Silence isn't emptiness, it's a boundary, and boundaries have weight. I didn't disappear to punish her. I disappeared to protect what was left of me. Every urge to reach out, to explain, to demand answers, I let it pass. Emotional reactions would only return power to the person who had already taken enough. Back in the city, Sarah unraveled. Confusion turned into panic when she realized I wasn't responding because I wasn't waiting. She drove past places we used to go, hoping to find me by accident. She asked questions that had no answers. The absence I left behind grew louder than any argument ever could. And for the first time since she had stepped outside our relationship, she felt what it meant to be left behind. The moment I vanished was the moment she realized I wasn't chasing her anymore. The town didn't know my name, and that was exactly what I needed. It was quiet in a way the city never allowed. Slow mornings, empty streets, strangers who didn't look twice. I rented a small place with plain walls and no memories attached to them. Nothing there belonged to my past. Nothing there expected anything from me. At first, the silence was unbearable. Without distractions, everything I had been avoiding rose to the surface. Nights were the hardest. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams that felt too real. I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there, my chest tight with a grief that had nowhere to go. Some evenings, I sat alone with the weight of it all, wondering how something that once felt so solid could collapse so quietly. But I didn't run back. Instead, I gave the pain structure. I woke up early and moved my body until the ache in my muscles drowned out the noise in my head. Long walks turned into routines. Routines turned into discipline. I worked during the day, poured myself into projects that reminded me I was capable, that my life extended beyond what I had lost. Progress was slow, almost invisible, but it was real. There were moments of weakness, times when my phone felt heavier than it should have, when curiosity whispered her name, tempting me to check, to see if she missed me the way I once missed her. I never gave in, not because I was strong every moment, but because I understood what going back would cost me. Loneliness teaches you things if you let it. It strips away illusions and leaves you with truth. And the truth I learned was simple and uncomfortable. Love without boundaries invites betrayal. I had given everything freely, assuming loyalty would meet me there. I had mistaken endurance for devotion. I had believed that being understanding meant being limitless. I wasn't angry about it anymore. I was aware. With that awareness came a quiet confidence. Not the kind that needs to be seen or validated. The kind that settles into your bones. I stood straighter. I spoke less, but with intention. I stopped explaining myself to people who hadn't earned explanations. My worth no longer felt negotiable. The past still visited me sometimes, not with the same sharpness, more like a distant echo. A reminder of who I had been and what I had survived. But it no longer pulled me backward. It no longer defined my direction. I wasn't rebuilding to impress anyone. I wasn't preparing a version of myself for her to find. I was becoming someone who no longer needed to be understood by the person who broke him. And somewhere between the quiet mornings and the sleepless nights, between discipline and acceptance, I crossed a line I didn't even notice at first. I became unreachable to my past. I didn't heal to prove anything. I healed because I deserved peace. The man she chose didn't last the way she expected him to. At first he was distraction, attention without effort, excitement without responsibility. He filled the silence I left behind with noise, with compliments, with presence that felt easy. But ease fades when there's no depth to hold it up. The more time passed, the more she noticed what was missing. He didn't listen the way I did. He didn't notice the small shifts in her mood, the quiet moments when she needed reassurance instead of admiration. Conversations stayed on the surface. When the excitement wore off, there was nothing beneath it. That's when my absence started to hurt, not as nostalgia, but as comparison. Guilt arrived slowly, not clean, not selfless. It mixed with regret that centered more on what she had lost than what she had done. She replayed moments she once took for granted, late-night talks. My patience, the safety she never thought could disappear. She told herself she missed me. What she really missed was how she felt when I was there. She tried to reach me again. Messages sent into silence. Calls that went unanswered. At first, she told herself I needed time. Then she told herself I was being cruel. Eventually, she had to face the truth: she no longer had access to me. That realization hollowed her out. She started asking about me, friends, old coworkers, anyone who might have seen or heard from me. She went back to places we used to go, lingering longer than necessary, scanning faces that weren't mine. Every unanswered question felt like punishment. Every dead end made the guilt heavier. She couldn't sleep. Her thoughts circled endlessly, the same way mine once had. Regret sat on her chest at night. pressing down until breathing felt like effort. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to lose someone without closure, to be left with silence instead of explanations. Months passed like this, and then, by accident more than effort, she found me. A familiar name mentioned by someone who didn't realize its weight, a location spoken casually, without understanding what it would unravel. She didn't hesitate. Fear and hope tangled together, pushing her forward before doubt could stop her. When she saw me from a distance, she almost didn't recognize me. I looked the same, but something about me felt close, settled in a way she had never seen before. That frightened her more than anger ever could. She stood there for a moment, gathering courage she didn't know if she still had. Her heart raced with questions she'd rehearsed for months. Apologies, explanations, promises. Then she took a step toward me. She finally found me, but she was already too late. She said my name like it still belonged to her. I turned slowly, already knowing who I would see. Sarah stood a few steps away, uncertainty written across her face, breath uneven, eyes searching for something familiar. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The space between us felt heavier than distance ever had. I nodded, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. She told me she was confused, that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she realized too late what she had lost. I listened fully, calmly, without interruption. There was no anger rising in me. I had already done my grieving alone. What stood in front of me now wasn't the woman I loved, it was the consequence of choices she had already made. When she finished, she waited. Hope trembled beneath her composure. This was the part she understood: apology, emotion, forgiveness. The part where love was supposed to bend back into place. I left because staying would have destroyed me. She flinched, like the truth landed harder than any accusation could have. I forgave you, I continued. Not for you, for me. Her eyes filled again. Then why does this feel like goodbye? Because it is, I thought, but I didn't say it. Instead I said, you didn't lose me when I left. You lost me when you chose something else while I was still choosing you. The realization settled into her slowly, painfully. She understood then that this moment wasn't a crossroads. There was no decision left to make. The ending had already happened quietly, months ago. She reached for my hand and stopped herself halfway, as if she finally recognized the distance she couldn't cross anymore. I took a step back, not out of resentment, but clarity. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, and I meant it. As I turned away, I felt nothing pulling me back. No unfinished sentences, no need to be understood, just peace. I forgave her, but forgiveness doesn't mean access. I learned something the hard way. Love doesn't guarantee loyalty. Giving your heart freely doesn't protect it from being broken. I thought trust was enough, that patience and understanding could hold someone to you, but I was wrong. Love without boundaries invites betrayal. It doesn't matter how quietly, how consistently, or how deeply you love. If there are no limits, there's nothing to stop someone from walking away while you're still standing in place. Silence, I discovered, has a power that words never can. Walking away isn't weakness, it's a declaration. It's choosing yourself over someone else's inability to value what you give. I didn't lash out. I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand answers or explanations. I simply left, and in that quiet decision, I found the control I had lost in my own expectations. It wasn't easy. The nights were long, the loneliness was sharp, memories haunted me. But every step away from her, from the life I had built around someone else, strengthened something far more important. Sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting for someone else, love it, walking away from it, when it no longer serves your dignity. I rebuilt myself quietly, without announcing it. I didn't heal to prove anything to her. I healed because I deserved peace. And in that peace I finally understood, some people aren't meant to stay. Some stories aren't meant to have closure, and some losses aren't yours, they are theirs. Have you ever stayed calm while someone expected you to break? Have you ever lost someone not because you didn't love them, but because you respected yourself? If this story felt too real, share it with someone who needs to hear this today.